Merry Christmas, and welcome to the 8th installment of A Very Terry Christmas. Every year, Terry Dimonte and I get together to record an episode just in time for your ears on Christmas. A few things before we start. First, good morning to Eli Curry, who is always the first to download this episode. That's an advantage you get when you wake up early in the morning and listen in Europe. Second, a word of warning. We swear a lot in this episode, at least 15 times. So if you're listening to this during the 12 days of Christmas, do not listen to it with the volume within earshot of Little Elves or Mrs. Claus. And if you're sensitive to the bad words, you might want to wait till New Year's to listen to this. Finally, Terry's just recorded his annual talk with the Prime Minister of Canada, Justin Trudeau, and we're going to be talking about that a fair bit in this show, but if you'd like to check out that fun conversation, the YouTube link is in the show notes. And with that, here we go. Terry Dimonte joins me from beautiful British Columbia.
I'm beginning to feel like my old self again.
What does that mean, you're beginning to feel like your old self again? Have you been through something?
Well, I'm laughing because, I see you push record. And, a lot of people who follow me on social media know, but my close friends and family really know what I've been through. I had open heart surgery on my 65th birthday this past year on January the 3rd, and the operation itself went swimmingly well, and then it stopped going swimmingly well. I came out of a 6-hour operation to replace my valve and have a bypass, and I was sitting up and everything was going well, and then everything went off the tracks. I got blood clots, I got a blood infection, I had to be intubated and re-intubated. I was on life support for about 16 days, hovering between life and death. My brother flew out from Ottawa because his background is in medicine. He was a helicopter paramedic, and he knew it was quite dire. He flew out to be by my wife's side. My wife was at the hospital every day, with fingers crossed, walking up the hallway to the cardiac ICU, hoping that she would get some good news. And for days on end, she didn't. There was either no change or it was more dangerous. Anyway, not the woe is me, because I came out of it. I got very, very lucky. Plus, I had the help of my wife, Jess, who was my advocate and was able to communicate with staff there and steer them away from theories that they had as I lay unconscious. And I guess, I don't know, around the 22nd or 23rd day mark, I don't know, because I was asleep or on life support. I started to come out of it, and then I couldn't talk for days on end because of the thing in my throat. And then it started to turn. I began to get to come out of it. They were able to take the tubes out, and they were able to take my feeding tube out, and it was pretty bad. It was really shitty. Not for me. I mean, it wasn't any fun for me, but it was really, really bad on my wife, Jessica, and, my family and other people like yourself that were following along on a daily basis, wondering if I was going to come out of it. So, and one of the things you don't realize, that when you're in bed for 35 days, your legs stop working. Everything stops working. The good news is you've lost 30 some odd pounds because of the feeding tube. The bad news is none of your muscles work anymore. And there's that moment where the nurse says, okay, I want you to put your feet on the floor and walk to that chair, which was like 3 feet across the room. And I put my feet on the floor. I can only describe my legs felt like a couple of Twizzlers, that were not going to hold me up. So, and you come out of open heart surgery. Open heart surgery, as my surgeon described to me, is kind of like being hit by a truck. They crack your chest open, they go digging around in there, and then you have complications, and then, you lie in bed for 30 days, and you think, okay, I'm out of the hospital. But February, March, April, May, I was just really stunned by how weak I was. And now, here as we record this in December, I love that we're doing this, by the way. It always feels so Christmassy when you call me. It's coming up on a year, and I'm starting to feel like my old self again. My scar still hurts. My legs aren't, I wouldn't say 100% back, but I'm working on it. So, and obviously I'm grateful to be on the right side of the potatoes, as Ted would say.
It was a little bit weird last year when we had our Christmas talk, and we didn't talk about you and your upcoming surgery at the time. It's really weird. Like we talk so openly all the time on this particular episode, and we couldn't talk about that. It was about a little over a week later you went into the hospital. It was your birthday.
I didn't want to talk about it, and neither did Jess. We didn't want to talk about it publicly. We didn't want to tempt fate. I didn't want there to be video of me talking about my surgery after I was gone. It felt weird. It was personal, and anybody who's been in the same situation will relate to this. I got diagnosed in August of last year, and in August, the cardiac people at Vancouver General Hospital said, your valve is done. We've got to go in and change it. And someone will call you and give you the details. August, September, October. Finally, the phone rings in October and they ask you a bunch of questions. And then they say, we'll call you back when we got a date. October, November, December. And all that while, I didn't realize this, but Jess told me I was getting grayer and my breathing was getting a little bit more
labored.
Labored, thank you. That was the word I was looking for. And she was scared and she didn't tell me about it. And obviously, all the doctors will tell you, open heart surgery, very routine. Well, yes, if you're a cardiac surgeon, it's very routine. But if you're a person who's a morning man, it's just unbelievably shit-inducing scary. You lie awake at night. I Googled everything I could find out about surgery and recovery and questions to ask. And every day I was on YouTube, I was driving Jess crazy. And, when we finally got the date and they told us it was going to be January 3rd, last Christmas, this time last year, we knew that in a week and a bit, I was going under the knife and they were going to crack my chest open. And we tried to pretend everything was normal, but it wasn't. And there was a cloud over the house with me and her. And we didn't want to talk about that publicly. We thought, we'll keep this to ourselves. And she said, when you're out and it's gone well. And, then we'll put a post up about where you've been. And Jess told me that, I'm not on the air anymore. So, it's not like I have a public following, but there are some people that follow me on social media and I do post a fair amount of stuff. And there's the podcast and Jess told me about 25, 26 days in, there were some like, where's Terry? Why hasn't he posted in a while? Is he okay? And she started to get texts from people and she didn't want to talk about it, obviously, because she was just overwhelmed with fear and worry. And I had no idea about the level of that fear until I think it was late March when I was well enough to get around. Jess and I wanted to thank the nurses in the cardiac ICU at Vancouver General Hospital who were unbelievable. The staff there and the care I got was spectacular. And that's the reason why I'm alive today. And we wanted to do something. And we found out that the ICU nursing station, they're at your bedside 24/7. There's one nurse, one patient 24/7, and their coffee machine was out. So I said, let's go buy them a coffee machine and go visit them. And I'll be able to say thank you to them. And in the Vancouver General Hospital, there's this long corridor, and I mean long corridor with nothing on the walls. It looked like a corridor from a Stanley Kubrick film. And we came around the corner, and I don't remember that corridor because I was at the end of it in the bed. We came around the corner and Jess said, hang on, I have to stop. And she began to tear up and put her hand on the wall. And I realized what she went through every day. She said, every day I made this walk. And when you get to the door of the ICU, there's a phone and you pick it up and you say, hi, it's Jessica. I'm here to see Terry. And she said some nights they would say to her, some days they would say to her, you have to come back in 10 minutes. And they wouldn't tell her why. They wouldn't tell her what was going on. And that phone that opened the door to whatever the news of the day was. So she would drive to the hospital and not know what condition I was in and sleep with the phone next to her ear at night when she could get some sleep, hoping it wasn't going to ring, because if it rang, it wouldn't have been good news. And, you know, just that whole sort of trauma of going through that. I was in the bed, you know, with a breathing tube in it, but it was my wife, Jess, that helped save my life and took it on the chin. So we didn't think it was a good idea to talk about it publicly until when she decided, you know, we're going to let everybody know you're okay. Then I said, yeah, you go ahead.
You had a few visitors. You mentioned Dean, who flew out from Ottawa.
Yeah.
And as well, the Prime Minister came to visit you.
Yeah.
Do you remember him being in the room and holding your hand?
I do. I really do, because it was quite moving. To give you an idea of where my head was at, I apparently said to Jess after he left, "Is the boat gone?" And in my head, I had it that there was a secret back door on the water that the Prime Minister came by boat and came up the secret back stairs. First of all, the Vancouver General Hospital is not anywhere near the water, number one. And number two, there is no boat for the Prime Minister. So that gives you an idea where my head was at. But having said that, he checked in with Jess almost every day via text to see how I was doing. And then he had events in Vancouver, and he texted Jess and said, "Can I come? You know, is it okay if I visit?" And, you know, it's close friends and family only. And we have no family out here. You know, we don't have any family, and we don't have very many friends, to be honest with you. We have one set of friends here. And, Jess said, you know, she had to tell the staff that there was going to be an RCMP guy calling because I was going to have a visitor that had RCMP protection. She didn't want to make a fuss. He didn't want to make a fuss. Anyway, long story short, he came in, and he's the Prime Minister of the country. So, you know, love him or hate him. And I know there's a lot of love on one side and a lot of hate on the other. People are still excited when they see the Prime Minister. That's just the way it goes. Most people anyway, except for the, you know, handful of raging assholes we now have in the country. And he came in, and the back door, created as minimal a fuss as he could. He didn't want to disturb anybody. And he pulled up a chair, and he grabbed my hand, and Jess was behind him, and he was talking to Jess. But Maddie, he held my hand for like almost 2 hours, and he didn't move. And he's got a pretty big job. So I found that incredibly, you know, when the dust all cleared, I found that incredibly moving. And I've said to a couple of people on a couple of occasions, that's a demonstration of who that man is. He's been my friend for a very, very long time, and he has a pretty big job. And he said, "No, tonight I'm going to visit a friend of mine who's in the hospital battling for his life." And he jokingly said to me on the interview this year that he enjoyed it because he visited me when I couldn't talk, so he could get a word in edgewise. But he did. He held my hand and talked to me about things that we had done, stuff that he was doing, and his kids. And he was kind to Jess and calmed her down, and, you know, leaned into me when he was leaving and said, "You got this. You have to fight. There's a lot of people waiting for you. We've got an interview to do this year." I can't even describe what it meant to me, you know, because of the circumstances. You know, listen, there are a lot of people that I love dearly, yourself included, other people in the East, in Toronto and Montreal and Ottawa. But people have lives. They can't jump on airplanes and, you know, and book hotels and come to sit by my bedside with a breathing tube in my throat. I didn't expect any of that. But I also didn't expect the Prime Minister of Canada to take time from what is a non-stop schedule to come and comfort me and my wife. And, you know, I had to steel myself this year at the end of our Christmas chat. The Prime Minister is somebody who doesn't take a compliment well. You can't, you know, you try and put praise his way and he gets all uncomfortable. And I grabbed his arm and I said, "Listen, I know you don't like to hear this, but you're going to hear it. And I just want you to know that it meant the world to me and my wife. It really did. It was special, and it's a memory I'll hold with me till the day I die."
He's had a busy year,
yeah.
I would say.
He always has a busy year.
I'm just thinking to myself about you've got this great show that you do with him every year, and then you want to go and distribute it and put it out, but you can't share the link because it's on Facebook and it's news.
That's right. Yeah.
It's like caught in his own legislation.
Yeah, it was ironic because the Toronto Star approached me this year, Susan Delacourt, who I love dearly. I have a lot of respect for Susan and the way she covers politics and her columns. I really, really enjoy her writing. And we've never met face to face, but we've had many conversations via email and on the phone. And she reached out this year and she said, are you chatting with the Prime Minister this year? And one of the things that has always really also meant the world to me is they reach out to me. The PMO gets in touch with me every year to say, so are we on? It's, you guys have the busy schedule. You let me know when you're going to be around. And Susan asked me if it was happening. And long story short, it's on the Toronto Star platform. And I had 2 requests of the Star. I said, number 1, it can't be behind a paywall. And number 2, the Prime Minister wants it out before Christmas, because the last time I dealt with the Star, they held it until after Christmas, and he wasn't pleased about that because he likes the Christmas vibe of the chat. So they said, yeah, absolutely. So it's not behind a paywall, and it's up on the Toronto Star website. It's up on my YouTube channel, and I put links up on my Twitter. Twitter's fun when you talk to the Prime Minister. That's another story. And I couldn't post it on Facebook because the link was on the Toronto Star. So it was kind of ironic that legislation kept me from spreading the word and putting the link up on Facebook or Instagram, for that matter. I had to do a little post saying, if you're looking for it, I posted a picture of me, the Prime Minister, and my wife. And I said, if you're looking for it, this is where you can find it, because, I couldn't post it because, as you point out, the legislation prevented that. Well, not the legislation, but Facebook's position.
Yeah, exactly. I'm sure you've had lots of hate. You've actually took time to address your hate, or the hate that you've been receiving, just for having him on your show, being your friend. And you pointed out time and time again that you don't even agree with a lot of the things he does, some of the things he does, but it doesn't stop a friendship. And I mention this because I got a note too, because I promoted the podcast we did. And somebody, I guess when they were through with you, decided to send me a note to talk about you a little bit more. And I wrote back to them, and I answered them exactly the way you would expect me to answer them, Terry.
Yeah, thank you, Matthew.
I know it's Christmas morning.
Yes.
But I told them to take a long, hard suck on my cock.
Merry Christmas, everybody. Oh, God. I give up. Every year I start the conversation with, it's not. This year I used a Walter Cronkite reference. Jesus Christ. Could you use an older reference? And I was trying to say, I'm not a journalist. This is not an interview piece. If you're looking for that, the Toronto Star is going to do one in January. The CBC will be all over him. He's going to do all kinds of year-enders, and they will question him on things like the climate and his Palestinian position and all of those things, many of which I don't agree with. And if we were at Ziggy's and having a beer, I would say to him, what is your deal with this? Like, why do you think that's going to work? And he would say, as he's said to me for over 30 years, okay, now look, here's why this is this and that. And I must admit, he's turned me around on a couple of things, and a couple of things I think he's full of shit on. And I would tell him that, but that's not the place for it. The place for that is in a private conversation between two friends. I'm not there to take him to task. I'm catching up with my pal. When your pal has a job like that, listen, if you have a friend who's the CEO of Air Canada or runs a big oil company in Alberta or is the president of the goddamn BC ferries out here, those people don't have a lot of time. They have jobs that require them to leave the office or the house, at 7 a.m, and often aren't back until 8 o'clock at night. And then when they get home at 8 o'clock at night, after they have a quick bite with the kids, then they open their files and do some studying for the next day. Being prime minister, whether you like him or not, it's a big job, and he doesn't have a lot of time. Every minute of his day is scheduled. When they contact me, like they did. They said the prime minister will be at the Fairmont Hotel and you have an hour starting at 2:15. That's it. Because he had something at 3:30 and he had something in the morning. And the motorcade dropped him off. He went upstairs. He changed. He came back downstairs. He sat with me for an hour. He took a picture. He gave me a hug. He kissed my wife goodbye. He went back upstairs. He changed. And as we were going out the door, he was getting in the motorcade to go to Surrey to meet with, I don't know who, but he was meeting with people. He had meetings all day. And then he was getting on the plane the next morning to get home to see if he could spend a moment or two with his kids before he had more meetings, blah, 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 blah. Anyway, all of that to say, you know, this hour that I get with him at Christmas, I'm extremely grateful for. And I want to know shit about my buddy's gig. I don't want to talk to him about his position at the UN. I don't want to talk to him about, you know, his environment minister and the environment minister's wacky ideas. Because I don't agree with everything. I don't want to talk to him about the pipelines and the convoys. I don't want to talk about any of that shit. I want to know, is Joe Biden nice? What's the plane like? Who puts files on your desks? Are you the boss? Do you have arguments with your ministers? Is there anybody who's pissed you off this year? One year I asked him, what's the world leader with the worst breath? You know, these are the kinds of things I get excoriated for, but this is the shit I want to know. Like, you know, if your pal, you know, you have a friend who's a rock star or who suddenly becomes the transport minister or adjunct to the prime minister in Britain or used to be the Queen's butler, don't you want to know shit about that? Aren't you curious about what that job entails? I am. Like I said to him, do you have milk in the fridge? What do you do about groceries? And he said, you're not going to believe this, but I like to go to Canadian Tire on Saturday. And of course, he's being excoriated for that. Bullshit, he doesn't go to Canadian Tire. Those are the things that I want to know. I want to know, do the kids have social media? Have they seen the fuck Trudeau flags? Like, you know, that's the stuff that I want to know so we can catch up, so I can tell him. I think about him all the time. You know, he was here, I think it was October or November, and he was having dinner in a restaurant that he loves in Vancouver, a rare occasion to get away for a couple of hours and have restaurant. His grandparents lived out here, so he has, you know, family and friends out here. And he went to the restaurant and protesters barged their way into the restaurant and surrounded his table. Didn't surround his table because the security people won't let that happen, but they barged into the restaurant and they're screaming and yelling. You know, they're screaming their slogans and yelling and flying flags in his face. He's trying to have dinner. Now, you could say he's a public figure. He's the prime minister. You know, he has to expect that people are going to protest, and he does. And I agree with it. People should be allowed to protest and tell him they disagree with him. But do you have to behave like assholes? Is there no respect or decency anymore? Could you not stand on the sidewalk and wait for him to come out and call him a piece of shit? So he had to get up from the table and he went around to each one of the diners in the restaurant to apologize. He said, I'm very sorry. I'm sorry I brought this and I didn't mean to ruin your evening. Please enjoy the rest of your dinner. I'm going to be leaving now. And he did that to every table in the restaurant and he left. And of course, he's surrounded by increasing security because, you know, people are unhinged these days. And I thought to myself, Jesus Christ. So I texted him right away and I said, are you okay? Because that's the way we communicate. We communicate by text. And I said, pal, are you okay? And he said, yeah. He said, it's just protesters. I'm fine. I'm being looked after. I'm fine. Don't worry about it, Dee. But I do. I do. He doesn't talk about it, and nobody in his office will talk about it. But let's just say I notice there's a couple of extra men around when he travels now. And listen, we're Canadians. I don't expect people to behave like they're behaving, but they are behaving like that. And when someone throws pebbles at you and calls your wife a whore, I don't know how you keep your patience. So I love this guy. I've been friends with him for a long time, and we like to have a Christmas catch-up, and we do. And I ask him the questions that I want to know about, like stupid things like, does he have milk in the fridge? Because I'm not working for 60 minutes. I want to catch up with my pal, and I want people to have an insight as to what it's like to be the Prime Minister of Canada. And how do you handle it when your kids have to go to school every day and other kids are telling them, my dad says your dad is a piece of shit. You know, that's a difficult thing to live with. Those are the things that I want to know. And that's what the chat is all about. And despite the fact that every year I say that at the beginning of the chat, I get all kinds of maddening, you know, they're not maddening because I don't give a shit anymore. You know, people are cray cray and there's nothing you can do about it. And they're unhinged and they don't think about him. You know, they call him, just on my Twitter feed today, they call him scum. You know, one woman on Instagram said to me, to call him your friend is a slap in the face to Canadians.
The Sound Off Podcast with Matt Kundle.
Okay, so that leads to the next question. And I know you don't know the answer, but I'm going to ask it anyway. How does somebody get to that point in their life where they believe that one man has the power to create some sort of havoc or problem in their life, that they are acting out in this particular way? Because I'm a poli-sci major. I know how politics works. You'd make it sound like he was an autocrat. It just doesn't work that way. I can't see. And by the way, like you go, if I walk through the trucker convoy a couple of years ago and you ask, why are you here, to 100 people, you would get 100 different answers. So what the fuck is wrong with people?
I really don't know. As a matter of fact, that's the way, you know, my question to him about ministers, I prefaced it by saying, a lot of people think you're an emperor, you know, that he's sitting at his desk making decisions that affects their daily lives. That's not the way a parliamentary democracy works. And I asked him, about the winds of the right wing blowing up from down south and the anger. And, you know, he said, there are people struggling and they're angry, and it's okay that they're angry with me, and I want to stick around and try and make a difference. My personal opinion is it's social media. Social media has made, for example, I'll say it on this podcast, I disagree with the country's position on the Palestinian conflict. I am pro-Israeli, full stop. And I don't want to hear it. And I think there's a lot of people, whether it's Me Too, Black Lives Matter, you know, the other social causes that people became involved with. I think the majority of people were heartfelt, and the majority of people think they're on the right side and they want to do the right thing, and it's what they believe. You know, I saw a picture, and I'm sure a lot of people have seen it, of the library at Harvard. And sitting in the library at Harvard was mostly young white women, American women, I'm assuming for the most part, with a big hand-painted sign at the back of the library that said, "Stop the genocide." And all of the women were wearing the Palestinian scarf around their neck. And I thought to myself, okay, you're a suburban 19-year-old from Connecticut who's in Harvard. Really? Really? That's your fashion accessory? Really? You really believe that? Same thing with, Queers for Palestine. Have you not read that they will fling you off a building if they find you having sex with somebody of the same sex?
You'd be the first to go, by the way, if you went there.
Yeah. So these are the things that I look at and I think, okay, well, why, what's going on? And I think it's social media, and it becomes a tsunami of things that people think they need to do, they have to do, and they get all ginned up, and leaders gin them up, political leaders, social leaders, municipal leaders, they gin their crowds up for their own political cause, and they get these people wound up. So that's what happened with vaccinations and the convoy and the conservatives and the climate pledges that the liberals have made and other things that have made people angry, the carbon tax, inflation. Everybody thought the prime minister was doing an amazing job when COVID first hit, and people forgot that. And then to push a political agenda, people got behind the anti-vax thing and the convoy thing, and he becomes the enemy. He becomes all the tropes that they drag out about, he was only a teacher and he doesn't know anything and he's stupid and he had a silver spoon in his mouth and all the things that I know aren't true. You're talking about a kid who, came from privilege, but was never coddled. His father wouldn't put up with it. And a kid who was raised to be home at the dinner table every single day. His father insisted that him and his two brothers be at the dinner table on time at 6:00. And at the dinner table, it was either a chat about communism, Shakespeare, the Constitution, politics of the day. This wasn't Al Bundy. These are intelligent, bright people. And my point always is, when I have this chat, is you may disagree with him. I'll give you the example of me and Ted Bird. Ted is very right-wing. Ted is right on a lot of issues. So am I. But I'm also center. I don't think I'm left on very much, but I'm center on a lot of things. I'm pro-abortion. I'm pro-gay marriage. I'm pro live your own life. Yeah, you want to smoke weed? Great. Love who you love. Enjoy your life. As long as you're not hurting anybody, away you go. And then I'm a little right of center when it comes to the way they spend the money, the bike pass, the other things that are changing cities that a lot of people think are important and I don't. But, Ted is mostly center and right. We've been friends for 40 years and we've argued and we've disagreed. We sat across each other from 40 years every day at 5:00 in the fucking morning. I love this guy. Do you think because he takes a position on one political issue that I'm going to go, you're a piece of shit?
No.
That's not the way to behave. You're a poli-sci guy. That's not what politics are supposed to be.
But that could have made it for a better radio show.
Absolutely. It would have been a lot more entertaining. Fuck you. No, fuck you. I understand that. It's a story that's been told 10,000 times. I don't need to tell it again. But, when Justin was a kid and he was going to the parliamentary cafeteria with his dad and he spotted Joe Clark and Justin said something like, there's the bad guy or the enemy. And his father was furious. Not furious, but, Justin was just a kid. He said, no, that's just a man I disagree with, and we're going to go over and have lunch with him. And him and Joe Clark sat across from each other, and there was a picture. This always seems to happen after they get out of office. There was a picture, I don't know if you saw it, of Jean Chrétien and Stephen Harper a couple of weeks ago standing next to each other and being civil and talking to each other as two people that cared a lot about the country, but had different ideas about how the country should be run. Justin has taken all kinds of phone calls from Brian Mulroney, and Brian Mulroney has called him to congratulate him on the job he did to save NAFTA. These are the things people don't talk about while you're yelling, you piece of shit, and flying your fuck Trudeau flag. I was visiting friends of my wife's in Barry's Bay, Ontario, and I'd slow the car down to like 4 kilometers an hour. I said to my wife, sweetheart, look at this. And on the porch of a beautiful old style, country Ontario home, the kind of home that you would see in a movie that looked charming and you would think, Ethel and Carl lived there and have been there for 80 years or whatever, with the porch, the beams of the front door, and strung from the porch was not a handmade sign, a sign that they went and had printed. And it was big. I mean, it was, I don't know, 15 feet by 20 feet. I don't know, like big. And like I said, not hand painted. It was printed. And it said in big black letters, fuck Trudeau. And underneath that lovely phrase, and it said, and if you love Trudeau, fuck you too. And I thought to myself, what has happened to Canadians that display of ignorance and horrible manners would be proudly displayed on your porch. And what do you do if your neighbors have children? What do you tell them? You know, I often drive by a truck out here in British Columbia with, 3 kids in the back and a dog and a man and a woman in the front flying a giant fuck Trudeau flag with stickers on the back that say fuck Trudeau. And I think to myself, how do you explain that to your children? Like when your kid says, Daddy, what's fuck Trudeau mean? I never saw Canadians as that. There was always, Uncle Harv at the Christmas table yelling and screaming and banging on the table about that fucking Trudeau or that fucking Joe Clark or that fucking Mulroney or whatever. But no one proudly displayed that. Like what's happened to us? And I go all the way back to when we first started talking about this. A lot of it is social media. It's easy to be a keyboard warrior. And it's pretty sad because I still view Canadians through the, hey, how you doing? Good. Do you want to come over for supper? Like you think of your early days in the Maritimes, Matt, and my early days in Manitoba was unthinkable that people would behave that with such crassness. It was unthinkable. And you would be rightfully excoriated for it. People would wag their finger and say, hey, there are children around. Stop it. And that's gone.
And not to be forgotten is that all this has been accomplished by Trudeau with a minority government, which means you can't do any of this without a little help from some other people.
Yeah.
Who are getting little to no blame. So it's this amorphous thing that is in people's minds that has been created. That it's the boogeyman.
Yeah. And to take it all back, you've known me for a very long time. I'm a kid from Verdun. My parents were blue collar, hardworking people that did the best they could to raise 3 kids. And I came from a family that didn't have any connections. We didn't know anybody in the media or politics or, I thought the Pierrefonds Pirates coach was a star. Like the junior B hockey team. I thought that guy was a celebrity. We didn't know anybody. And I'm interviewing the prime minister. And that's just never lost on me. And I just get such, when we're walking away from the hotel this, a couple of weeks ago, I said to my wife, we just had a chat with the prime minister. It still isn't lost on me. I think it's very cool. And I think it's a lovely thing that he does. And I know there are many, many people that enjoy it. And there's a lot of people that throw shit my way and his way. But I think it's a lovely thing that 2 old friends get together and talk at Christmas, just like you and me. And you happen to be the emperor of the Sound Off Podcast Network, and he happens to be the prime minister. And I love both chats just as much.
I do find it really odd the way people have fallen off a cliff. And I think you are right. I think it is social media. I remember you always told me sign your name to your work. And I think a lot of people they don't do it. I think they think they're media wizards or something. But no, they can't sign their name to their work. By the way, all these people, I don't think they would come up to you and say this to your face. I think they just love doing it, from behind a keyboard. But do none of these people have like friends who might vote NDP? Or who might vote conservative, or who might vote liberal or Green Party?
I don't know. And I don't think they're interested in any kind of like normal chat. As you're telling me this, I'm looking at my Twitter feed and, the amount of things that come is from Vivons and Ling Pao and Mountain Dreaming and all kinds of bots. They're all hiding behind this shit. And what really, really is stunning to me is, because you're hiding behind a mask and because you're hiding behind a keyboard, it's amazing to me how deep the depths that they can plumb, the depths of hatred that they can plumb, and how nasty they can get. Even though it's behind a keyboard, it still is in a public forum. Some of the things they say, they think they're being clever. And there was somebody said, Toronto Star writing another fluff piece for their boy. That's not nasty, but it's just, it always surprises me. And I think to myself, I forget where the quote is from. a famous comedian, or it was in a movie. I forget where it was. You kiss your mother. I think it was Cheech and Chong. You kiss your mother with that mouth? You brush your teeth with them? Like, honest to God, like, Jesus, like, calm down. Honestly, calm down.
They really have something to say. They can just call me. I'll get you a podcast.
Yeah.
I can assure you it will not be very good. It won't last very long. You don't even have a lot to say that's smart, but we'll get you the podcast.
There anyway. You go. Or stand Matty and he'll tell you to suck his dick.
I got to ask, you don't miss radio, do you?
I do a bit.
You don't miss the hours, or you don't miss the radio?
No, God, no. I never miss the hours, but I have to admit I do a bit, because this that we're doing now, me talking into a microphone and telling stories, I loved doing that. I really did. And I still do. And we do to an extent on the podcast, but as you well know, until everything went sideways 10, 12 years ago, the magic in the medium is just something that isn't replaced. I was in my pharmacy a couple of days ago, and him and I get along like house on fire, but nobody knows what I did for a living out here. I'm completely anonymous out here. And he asked me out of the blue, and nobody does. So I was a little bit taken back. He said, are you retired? I said, yeah, I am. He said, what did you do? And I said, well, I worked in the radio business for many years. He said, oh, what did you do in the radio? And I said, well, I was a host of a morning show in Montreal for a very long time. He went, oh my God. And I said, well, you wouldn't have known it. He said, I love radio. He said, I love the companionship of radio. He said, I can do everything that I'm doing. And radio has, he didn't use the word magic, but he was explaining that radio didn't need pictures, and yet it could still keep me company. And then he said something that stunned me, because I thought only radio people talk like this. He said, radio feels like my friend. It's like having a friend here. And I said, yeah. I said, Nadji, that's the magic of radio. That has always been the magic of radio.
It's live, man. It's live.
Yeah. Live and in the moment, and I still to this day, especially when I go back to Montreal, people still say to me, I grew up with you, I don't remember high school, high school wouldn't have been the same without you and Patty or you and Ted. And it's not that I'm living in the past, and I don't want to live in the past, but I wish I had an outlet. I could keep people company maybe once or twice a week and maybe tell stories. There was a plan. A lot of people don't know this, but the guy who hired me brought me back to Montreal from Calgary, Martin Spalding. My contract expired in May of 2020, I think it was.
2021?
Yeah, anyway, it expired in May. So that was my quote unquote retirement. And in the Christmas prior to May, so like 5, 6, 7 months before my contract expired, Martin said to me, I think we can come up with an idea for you. You could be like a sort of a show'em emeritus guy. Maybe you could do the odd special. He said, what would be great? We could do your Christmas show every year. And, we could record that and run that around Christmas and just sort of keep your presence around. He said, would you like that? I said, yeah, I would love to talk about that. I said, I'm sure we can come up with some ideas after I have a long break. I'd look forward to that. And in January, they fired him. And that was the end of that. So there was some discussion prior to the, let's get rid of this guy and his salary. There was some discussion about, maybe I could do a thing or two. And when I think about it, I think, yeah, I wouldn't mind doing that. I do that thing with Ted at Light 106.7, small radio station in Hudson, and him and I put together a show for Saturday morning from 9 to noon. That's a lot of fun.
Do you remember when that was first introduced to you at Shome? Doing a Saturday morning best of show? Whose idea was that?
But you know what? That's a feather in your cap, my friend.
That's a good idea.
Because it was popular and we had a ball doing it. We had an absolute ball doing it. Every Friday, Ted and I would send our producer across the street to get fried chicken from the Provigo. contributing to part of my problem at the hospital, I guess. And we would sit and we would listen to clips from the week and we'd howl with laughter. And then at the end of the show, Mark would put together about a 5 or 6 minute blooper reel because we were having so much fun. Mark said, we got to share this with the audience. And that proved to be the most popular part of the show. We had a ball doing it, an absolute ball doing it. So yeah, you were right. And it, I don't know, it took an hour out of my Friday or whatever, but I don't know what it is about the business, but the business and its current shape are not interested at all in people who'd been doing it for a while. I had one guy tell me that he said, managers think you guys want a lot of money to do it. And I said, you'd be stunned at how little money I do it for. I'm retired. I would do it for fun. Anyway, that's again, Terry's long-winded answer to say, I do miss it a bit. I really do, because as you know, Matt, it was our passion. I couldn't believe people paid us to do it. It was just, when I got to Winnipeg in 78, I thought I won the lotto. I could not believe that they had turned me loose in a radio station with a library full of albums that I could choose and pick and put my own radio show together and leave me in the building from midnight to 6. I just thought I died and gone to heaven.
I can't believe they did that to me either, especially when I look at that I have kids the same age, because I would not let them go and run loose in a radio station with records. Yeah. Going to leave these kids in charge of a station between midnight and 6? I don't think that's a good idea.
Leave the kids in charge of anything. Yeah. I look back on it with such fondness and also gratitude, because we were very lucky, that era that we were in. I was watching a documentary. My wife and I are both JFK fans, fans of the man and the story. And we were watching a JFK documentary, one of the 9 million we've seen. And I said to Jess, look at that. That was the era. That was the era where radio was king. People on the streets of New York with the transistor radios held up to their head. That was the town square. We grew up in an area where radio was the town square. If you wanted to know where the Queen City Kids were playing on Friday night, which bar they were going to be at, you had to listen to City FM. If you wanted to know when AC/DC was coming to town and where to get tickets, you had to listen to City FM. If you wanted to hear the new Back in Black, you had to tune in City FM. It was, I get it. It was a different era. But I think there's a lot of things are diminished because that era is gone. I saw on Facebook that this, or, CBS put on Twitter that they're doing this or whatever. It's just, the world is better and blah, blah, blah. But, all of that to say was we were very, very lucky that we grew up in that era. And it's a special time when I see it reflected in documentaries and movies like that, when people are standing and gasping when they get the news out of the little box from the transistor being held up to their ear. It's a display of the magic of radio that I don't think is gone, by the way. I don't think there's a lot to listen to on the radio anymore because a lot of spontaneity is gone and a lot of local stuff is gone. You can still reach out and touch people through the radio speaker if you know what you're doing.
How's your TV viewing? And when I ask you that, I really mean, have you watched The Gilded Age?
My wife and I love it.
Love it?
My wife and I are Downton Abbey fans.
Yeah, me too.
So there's a common thread there because of the writer and the era of history. And we think it's terrific. And I'm forgetting her name as I'm trying to tell this story. But the lady who was on The Good Wife, and Christ, what's her name?
Christine
Baranski. Thank you.
I also want to mention, by the way, she's a huge Buffalo Bills fan.
Is she really? My wife and I say this every time we watch The Gilded Age and The Good Wife. My wife turned me on to The Good Wife. I didn't watch it when it was on, and I couldn't believe that I missed it. Christine Baranski is one of the most underrated actresses in Hollywood, I think. She is amazing in this role, and I just love the writing in The Gilded Age. I just think it's terrific. I'm glad you're watching it.
Yeah, and Wrexham. I know you've got a football fan for a wife, so
yeah,
Wrexham.
And I've become a football fan, and I would watch Ryan Reynolds read the phone book.
Yeah.
Is there any guy who's more charming and clever and fun? And he, I don't know him. I've never met him, but he just looks like the nicest, kindest man in the world with the greatest sense of humor. And every time he has a new Mint Mobile commercial, I get excited. I go on YouTube to find it. One of the many companies that he owns, in his gin commercials, and what he did with Wrexham is genius. It's absolute, like from a business point of view, a marketing point of view, and also a football point of view. And the good that it's done for that town has been spectacular. My only criticism, if you're watching this, Ryan, is he wasn't in the part 2, the second season of the documentary isn't as compelling because he's not in it very much.
It came to my mind when you were saying, hey, I do this for peanuts. And I don't think I'm ruining the show by mentioning this, but to go and get Ben Foster out of retirement for the last 8 games of the year is kind of like, I'm going to bring Terry Dimonte in to do Sunday morning so we have a good book.
Yeah, I guess there's a little bit of a similarity to that. Of course, then I'd have to move back to Montreal.
You're doing exactly what they thought you'd be doing anyways afterwards. And you're doing Christmas shows. You're doing all that. You got a podcast going. I don't mean to say that like you haven't gone away, but there's still tons of content you're producing. So nobody's going to forget about you.
No, I'm not concerned about that. I always talked about this, saying that the celebrity or notoriety or whatever you want to call it that came with being on the radio every morning was a byproduct. It was just a byproduct of what we did. I didn't do it for that. You just had to accept it. It's why I get angry when I hear people complain about being famous. You hear actors say, it's too much and you have to leave me alone. And hey, shut up, right? The people who watch your movies or your television shows, and you have to know, I had like a tiny, tiny, tiny little sort of taste of it as a morning radio host. And I get it. If you're Ryan Reynolds or you're somebody, the prime minister or somebody with a big, big public figure, it's going to be tough to go out in public. But I have no sympathy for you, that you're living that wonderful life because you're in the public eye. It's just something that you have to put up with. I always remember chatting with Guy Lafleur and interviewing him when his book came out years ago. And I said to him, what did you like about playing for the Rangers? And he said to me, I got to do my grocery. I said, what? He said, I could do my grocery. He said, it was fun for me because I could go do my grocery and nobody know who I was, and I understood it because Guy Lafleur cannot walk or couldn't have walked, rest in peace, any city in this country from coast to coast to coast. He couldn't have gone anywhere. Everybody would have recognized him. But in New Jersey, he could do his grocery. And I don't know why I got on that. I went on a tangent there about actors who complain about being recognized, I guess.
Well, the way it was explained to me from you was it comes with the territory. So if you're going to be an actor, that's what happens.
Yeah. And normally people would just say, hey, Terry, how you doing? Or they'll say, hey, Terry, I loved your show. Or, it's nice to meet you. My father and I listen to you every morning. Thank you. That's a wonderful, wonderful compliment. That's kind, and every once in a while you get, I never listened to you. Okay. That's fine. Not everybody did. That's okay.
Did you watch A Small Light?
A Small Light?
On Prime.
I haven't watched that. I'm writing it down.
Okay. That's going to be my recommendation to you. And I think a lot of people have overlooked it as being a radio story because it's it's a love story. It's a World War II story. It's a story of many things, but you and I would watch it and we would say, that's a radio story.
Is that the story about the girl who was the thing with the German guy and that thing? Okay.
Correct.
Thank you. I'm going to watch this. Thank you. I watched the trailer, but I haven't watched it yet.
Very surprised a lot of radio people haven't mentioned, hey, it's a radio story. But it's a radio story.
Yeah, so cool.
What you doing for your birthday this year? Because last year, it's not going to be a hard act to follow. Because last year it was open heart surgery, and this year,
yeah, a little quieter, I hope, and no saw to the chest. I'm hoping. I don't know if that's what it sounded like. I was asleep. My wife and I, Jess and I, have had conversations about it. This is something else that I haven't talked about publicly. What's been interesting is because I had such a struggle and because I was in so much trouble and flirted with the other side, as it were, my wife has been experiencing a bit of trauma, not paralyzing trauma. I don't want to overplay it and be over dramatic. But when December arrived, because this time last year, it was so intense and we were so frightened. When December arrived, she started to get edgy and feelings of, and it came up. I said, what do you want to do on my birthday? And she said, well, we're going to do something joyous and celebratory. That's what we're going to do. As a matter of fact, she wants to have 2 different celebrations. Her dad is coming to visit from Quebec after Christmas. He'll be here, I think, on the 27th. And she said to me last night, would you mind if we did a birthday thing with my dad while my dad is here? And I said, no, do you want to do it early? And she said, no, I want to do 2. So we're going to do one with dad when he's here. And then we'll do one with me and you on the 3rd. So I don't know what it is. We're going to decide maybe a restaurant or something. We have not found any good restaurants. I'm sure we talked about this before. We find the food absolute shit out here. I mean, it's fine if you like Earl's.
Whoa, you're overlooking some here, Terry. Kelsey's, Moxie's, Montana's, Joey's.
Yes.
Come on, you just got to open your eyes a little bit.
God, yes. And what we think, and BC people they're going to hate us for this, but we don't know anybody. Nobody talks to us. We have no friends, but a couple of people have said to Jess, like at work, oh, we have to try such and such. And we'll go and think, oh my God. And what we've realized is if you grew up here, right? Vancouver was, BC's a small province and has been, it's not a small province anymore. I don't mean geographically. I mean, population wise, for years and years and years, Vancouver was, fairly small population wise, and you can get amazing Asian food, amazing Indian food. Those are the kinds of things that you don't want to have Chinese food like every second or third day or every weekend. And I'm not an Indian food fan, as you well know.
I did actually. I asked you if you wanted to have Indian food one night, and you said you would eat it right over the toilet.
Yeah, just bring it into me. I'll sit on the can, and we'll cut out the middleman. Exactly. bring me a towel so I can mop my forehead, and I'll just eat it as it's coming out the other end. That's how it goes with me. Cut out the middleman.
We have to put this episode out on the 26th. There's no way we can put this out on the 25th.
Yeah, it hasn't been very Christmassy.
Never is.
Well, we're trying to decide if we can find a restaurant. We went to, when we got married in British Columbia, and we had our reception at High's. High's is my all-time favorite steakhouse of all time. I've had so many great memories. It all started in Winnipeg, at the High's in Winnipeg. That was, I think, the very first fancy steakhouse I was ever in. Andy Frost was our waiter.
Really?
Yes. Andy Frost was a waiter at the High's in Winnipeg, and he was one of the best waiters ever in the history of High's. He was a really great, how I was talking about the service at High's and how great it is? That was my first exposure to it, was Andy Frost. I'd never seen anything like it.
My son is working there.
Yes. Is he still there?
Yep.
Yeah. And I love the High's in Winnipeg.
But I want Andy Frost to bring me the steak and announce it. Yeah. Here is your steak. Filet. Medium rare.
When you put the podcast out, you have to let Andy know. Tag Andy in the podcast. Anyway, we were at High's in Vancouver the other night. We were downtown for, after the interview with the Prime Minister. I said, we're downtown, sweetheart. Let's go to High's. And I'm sorry to say the High's in Vancouver has lost its fastball.
Dang.
Very disappointing. So all of that to say, we don't know. Joe Forte's is a great restaurant. We may go there. But the other thing now, I don't know if you've noticed this, Maddie, in Winnipeg, but a lot of restaurants, we call the we called a restaurant in the fall that Stanley Tucci had talked about. And Jess said, oh, Jess loves Stanley Tucci. And anyway, she called the restaurant that he had talked about, that he had been at when he was in Vancouver. And they said, yeah, we have tables available November 24. She said, thanks for nothing. What kind of way is that to run a restaurant? Anyway, all of that to say is, if anybody's from Vancouver and wants to DM me about a restaurant that they love, and please don't recommend the Cactus Club. We go there all the time. There's one close to our house. We're Quebecers, right? I want Malboeuf. I want the Monklin Tavern. I want the corner little tiny place in, Petit Patrie and the restaurant in the back corner of Montreal, the places where, the old Italian family's been there for 1,000 years, that kind of thing. That, for some reason, we haven't found that here.
Terry, Merry Christmas to you. I'm sorry I'm not going to see you. Maybe in 2024, we will resolve to see one another.
Listen, I apologize. I had fully intended to be there because I missed the annual visit with you for the dip in the pool. Not that I come to visit you for the swim, but I like the fact that you do have a pool in the backyard. And you know how much I love your children. I'm very fond of your kids, and I wanted to see them. And also, my radio dad, Don Percy, lives in Winnipeg, and I can't believe I missed the visit this year. So I promise you I will make up for it in 2024.
Good. I'll handle the dinner.
Okay. I'll look forward to that. As long as it isn't nothing, not that there's anything wrong with Earls or the Cactus Club. Don't get me wrong. They're absolutely fine.
Oh my God. You have a Cactus Club in your part of the world? We don't even have one in Winnipeg.
I'm sure you will soon.
We have a Highs. They'll roll out the red carpet for you.
Yeah. I hope so. Merry Christmas to you and the boys, Matthew, and give our love to Abe and give our love to your mom and the other Cundles that are all around the world. Would you?
And Merry Christmas to Jess. I think of her every time Man U is on. I go, oh my God. Actually, this year it's been like, oh my God, is Jess okay?
Yeah, Saturday and Sunday mornings have not been fun here. Yeah. If you're a Man U supporter, you know what I'm talking about.